Hey, AJA Sports Nation. Welcome back to episode 2 of the Fantasy Player Position Breakdown. I'll be hosting today. I'm Ace. We have, as always, the Honorable Jay and fantastic Andrew.
What's going on,
Today
guys?
we're gonna break down tight ends for you. I'm gonna give these guys the player. They're gonna tell me how they feel about their 2021 fantasy outlook. All right. So first, we're gonna lead off with Travis Kelce. So Mr. Travis Kelce had a phenomenal season last year, 312.76 fantasy points. He had 145 targets, 105 catches for 1,416 yards, 11 touchdowns. Pretty solid all-around effort. Andrew,
Beast.
what's your take on Kelce?
So, I mean, pretty much just the gold standard at the position right now. Since Rob Gronkowski kind of took his step back and did his retirement, he's finished number one. He's finished as the number one fantasy tight end in PPR scoring every season since 2016. And the thing I love about Travis Kelce is that he's targeted like a wide receiver. He's been targeted over 115 times. And at least 130 times since Patrick Mahomes took over as Chiefs quarterback since 2016. The next closest tight end to him in terms of points was Darren Waller with 268. As you mentioned, he finished with 312. The next closest after that was Robert Tonyan with 176, which is almost 150 more fantasy points than the third highest scoring tight end in fantasy football. So lock him in as tight end one. As long as he's healthy, I don't see any sort of regression coming. He hasn't dealt with injuries since year one. So if you get a chance to draft him, swoop him up because he ain't going to be on the board for long if once the tight ends start coming off.
Yeah, that take didn't take you long to let us know how great Travis Kelce is.
Definitely won't.
It's a free spot, man. It's crazy.
Pretty much wide receiver numbers via tight end. Okay, so our next tight end on the list is George Kittle. He was a little injured last season, finished the season with 125 points, 48 catches for 634 yards and 2 touchdowns, and had a couple of rushes to boot. So Jay, what's your take on Kittle next year?
Yeah, so the 2 years he was healthy was 2018 and 2019 before the last, but he missed 8 games. In those seasons, he had 80-plus catches, over 1,000 yards, and 5 touchdowns in each of them. Like you mentioned, last year he was a little injured. In that Kyle Shanahan offense, he's someone who really thrives and gets the most out of the yards per catch ability that Kyle Shanahan allows for his playmakers, again, in that offense. Something that I found interesting, Andrew mentioned that obviously Travis Kelce's in a tier all by himself. But in 2019, he actually averaged the same amount of PPR points per game on average as Travis Kelce. But he only played in 14 games, so his overall total was a little lower, which is why he finished as tight end too. But just to show you, I mean, it's really just him and George Kittle. There's a third player who you'll see next on, and Andrew will talk about a little bit coming up, who's making a push to be third and kind of push himself into that tier. But, right now it's still just Kelce and Kittle. So, yeah, I think if you have Kelce or Kittle, you feel pretty confident every week that you have you've won a spot in your lineup, whether that be in season long. And in DFS, he's an interesting play as a run back option as well.
Yeah, great, solid, easy take. Kittle's in the 1B class for sure. So we have Darren Waller, as you aforementioned, on the list. Finished the season with 278 fantasy points, 107 catches for just under 1,200 yards receiving, and 9 touchdowns. So a great effort from the Oakland tight end. Andrew, is he going to looking good next season too?
Absolutely. Considering the wide receiver options and just, I guess, pass catching options that the Raiders have, he's probably their best pass catcher by a long shot. Henry Ruggs is still leaving a lot left to be desired for, but he was a rookie last year. He's super versatile. He can line up at the wide receiver position, like I mentioned, in the slot or on the line of scrimmage. The thing I like a lot is that he saw 30 more targets from his first year as a starter and caught 17 more balls in his second year as being the full-time starting tight end for the Las Vegas offense. His quarterback, Derek Carr, is great at throwing those short and intermediate routes. And when you split him out wide, there's not really a corner who can really cover him in terms of when you factor in his size and speed and pass catching ability. He's just a huge target on the outside. I would expect nothing less than 100 targets given that versatility. And like I said, the lack of a true number one wide receiver or pass catching option, however you want to slice it, will make him definitely have an opportunity to vault himself into that category of Kelce and Kittle moving forward. So Darren Waller, another guy too that you want to have, kind of as Johnny mentioned, could definitely be a free spot going forward in daily fantasy and year-long fantasy.
Yeah, so speaking of not having a number one wide receiver option, we go to Mark Andrews. So Mark Andrews might be wide receiver one for Baltimore. Last season, he had 170 fantasy points, 88 targets. He caught 58 of them for 701 yards and 7 touchdowns. Jay, what are we thinking about Mark Andrews next season?
Yeah, so we're not going to talk about it too much, but apparently the Baltimore Ravens decided not to get another receiver for Lamar Jackson, but we'll continue with Mark Andrews and how well he's been playing. He finished as tight end 6 last year if you look at overall fantasy points from tight ends. If you look at his average, though, at 12.2 per game, he'd actually finished as tight end 3. He only played 14 games last year, so he missed a few. We kind of talked about this on another show when we talked about the tight ends in that speed round. However you see Lamar going is how you're going to see Mark Andrews going. This makes him a great option if you're going with season long or in DFS as a stacking option. Lamar Jackson, you know where the ball's going if he's going to score touchdowns. He had 7 touchdowns last year. Mark Andrews did. And Lamar had 26 of those. That's a 27% touchdown share on Lamar Jackson throws. And when you look at 2019, he had 10 touchdowns, did Mark Andrews, while Lamar had 36, which is exactly 27% of Lamar Jackson's passing touchdowns. So again, however you see Lamar going, Mark Andrews is normally going to go. So I'm a big Lamar Jackson guy, so I see that he's going to go pretty well. So I'm usually pretty high on Mark Andrews myself.
Okay, well, we'll see how high Andrews on the next guy, especially since his quarterback just changed. TJ Hockenson out of Detroit, 175 fantasy points last season, 67 catches for 723 yards, 6 touchdowns to boot, including a game winner. Andrew, are we high on Hockenson?
I am, and I guess the main reason I am is because Jared Goff is a quarterback who does like Derek Carr, who I talked about with Darren Waller, loves to work the middle of the field. He's a quarterback who loves to stand pat in the pocket, and Hawkinson's a nice target over the middle. What I really liked out of Hockenson was his production from year 1 to year 2. He basically doubled everything. So he went from 32 receptions to 67, 59 to 101 targets, 2 to 6 touchdowns, 367 yards to 720 yards. So just seeing that alone is encouraging. And then the fact that you factor in that Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones are no longer on the roster, you imagine that the Lions will do something maybe either in the draft or most likely in the draft, because they would have paid Kenny Golladay had they, with the money that they currently have in their salary cap. Hockenson kind of just, becomes a de facto number 1 guy until they find a solid replacement. I don't think Quintez Cephas is the guy right now. I think Dan Campbell is going to really count on him, especially seeing how much he has progressed. And he saw 100+ targets. He saw 101 targets last season. So, again, anytime I see a tight end get more than 100 targets, it's super encouraging, and I'm going to want him on my yearly fantasy team. It's just the amount of the more volume that a guy gets, it equals the more opportunity for him to score points and get into the end zone. And, like I said, the positive regression that we saw with all those statistical categories is really, really encouraging. And like I said, Jared Goff is good at working in the middle of the field, and Hockenson is one of the best to do it and up and coming. So Hockenson's really good. I would like him on my yearly team.
So speaking of working in the middle of the field, our next guy, we'll see. I don't know how well his quarterback can work the middle of the field or work at all. We have some hot takes about him. That is Drew Lock's Noah Fant. But we might be potentially having someone else throw to him next season. We don't really know. So beside Drew Lock throwing, Noah Fant had 149 fantasy points, 62 catches for 673 yards and 3 touchdowns. Can we spin a positive vibe to Noah Fantastic, Jay?
I'm going to try as best I can when his quarterback is the number 1 overall draft pick for #AJ Sports Team Cheeks. He finished as the tight end number 9 last season with a average of a 10. Stop, Andrew. With an average of a 10. Where he averaged 10 points per game. That was encouraging. His rookie year, he only averaged about 7. He saw an increase in targets last year from his rookie year by 27, and his catches jumped from 40 to 60, from 40 to 62. Maybe if Locke wasn't so cheap, both of those numbers would go up. You're making me laugh. It's very encouraging to see both of those increase. Hopefully the yards and touchdowns will follow, though. Those two kind of lag behind. Locke only has a 57% completion 57% completion percentage last year, which is why he is the number 1 draft pick for Team Cheeks. But yeah, we'll see. I like Noah Fant coming into this year as long as Drew Lock can get his head on right and throw the ball a little more accurately. Sorry, guys, that was just too funny with Andrew.
We'd like to let you all know that if you like and subscribe and follow along, you'll not only get quality fantasy content, but you'll also get Jay laughing at his own jokes, even though he blamed Andrew. All right, so I don't know if we can blame the quarterback in this next situation, but that is Dallas Goedert, and he's got up-and-coming Jalen Hurts thrown to him next season, so we'll see how that turns out. But for last season, kind of playing as the tight end 2 on the roster, he had 116 fantasy points, 46 receptions for 524 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So, Andrew, I mean, he has an opening here. What do you think about Dallas Goedert for 2021?
Yeah, and I think he's really looking forward, and as well as him and Zach Ertz worked together initially in Philly with Carson Wentz and the chemistry they built up there. I think Dallas Goedert is probably looking forward a little bit to having the tight end position all to himself. Jalen Hurts doesn't have the strongest arm. He's an accurate thrower, and he's going to be looking for Goedert kind of all over the place. He's one of those tight ends that you can kind of line up a little bit out wide, but mostly kind of plays off the line on the line of scrimmage. He only played 11 games last year after only missing 1 game in the first 2 seasons of his career. And while Zach Ertz was on and off like the injury report, he was on pace for 95 targets, and had he been able to play all 16 games, would have been just shy of the 1,000-yard mark. So I have a lot of upside in my opinion for Dallas Goedert. He's a multi-versatile tight end that can do a lot of different things, a lot of things well. And I think Jalen Hurts is a solid pairing, especially when you factor in the kind of play calling that Doug Peterson likes to employ. A lot of the styles of Andy Reid when he brought over from that he brought over from his days in Kansas City, the West Coast style of offense where you're able to really isolate tight ends on linebackers. And I think Dallas Goedert will find himself nice and well being the tight end 1 over in Philly next season.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, a lot of the draft class we are looking at, some of these guys are the main options, and then that's why they succeed so well. So the next name on this list is potentially the number 1 option, but we might have a competition at camp. It's Hunter Henry, so he's moving teams to the New England Patriots, and who knows? Maybe he isn't tight end 1 after the season commences. Hunter Henry's stats last season with Justin Herbert was 145 fantasy points, 60 catches for 613 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So with Cam Newton throwing him the ball, what do we think for his outlook next season, Jay?
Yeah, I think this is a little bit of a gaudy ranking for him. I think maybe this is still kind of lagging behind from before he was signed. Kind of implying that he'd be back with Justin Herbert. Newton does like to throw to big-bodied pass catchers. We've seen it with Kelvin Benjamin. We've seen it with Greg Olsen and Jeremy Shockey when he first got into the league. In his rookie season, he actually had Greg Olsen and Jeremy Shockey, and he threw the ball to them 151 times for 82 completions, 995 yards, and 9 touchdowns. That's only a completion percentage of about 54%. If that's the kind of production and target share we're going to see from both of these guys, and Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, I'd probably pass on both. After that season, Olsen caught 800-plus yards in every season that they were both healthy. But Hunter Henry is not Greg Olsen. Greg Olsen is, probably one of the top, 5 tight ends of the last decade. And the problem is there's 2 mouths to feed now. Jonnu Smith is going to get almost every opportunity that Hunter Henry is most likely. Asa kind of mentioned it, that there's going to be a competition at camp. I mean, I think they're just going to run a lot of 2 tight end sets and let both of those guys kind of just eat each other up. And I don't really need that fantasy value cannibalizing each other. As we kind of mentioned before, Hunter Henry has never in his career gone over 700 receiving yards. Currently, Evan Engram is ranked under him. Logan Thomas is ranked under him. I would take both of them over him right now, especially given the situation with Logan Thomas getting Ryan Fitzpatrick and Evan Engram, the Giants signing Kenny Golladay, opening up some more stuff in the middle of the field for him to work as well.
Yeah, so we're working with Fantasy Pros rankings here, and they update them as the season goes on. So these are the PPR rankings for the 2021 season. the way that we'll look at it is we'll probably see some of these names regress. Some of these two tight end duos, for sure, will probably take a little hit once we actually get realistic playing time going. And another tight end duo is Evan Engram. He now has to deal with sharing snaps with Kyle Rudolph next season. Andrew, is that going to be enough to make him stand out for 2021?
I don't think so. Oh, excuse
You're
me.
good.
Yeah, I actually like Evan Engram a lot. Like Jay said, coming into this season, I like him a bit more than Hunter Henry. The one thing that I want to see more is he's probably not going to score one touchdown next season as long as he plays those 16 games. That's just probably an unlikely scenario. Last year was kind of an anomaly for him. I guess the one area of concern is I say he's not going to score more than only one touchdown, but after scoring 6 his rookie season, he's only managed 7 in the 3 seasons since then. But again, I think the more volume and the more that Daniel Jones gets comfortable as the starter in New York, he's going to continue to be a high target guy, including last season. He led the team in targets and was second in receptions, only behind Darius Slayton by 2, but he finished with 63, like you mentioned. Now you add a guy like Kenny Golladay in the mix. I expect them to be a little more dispersed and maybe won't exactly get to the 100 target threshold, but I expect the same kind of production to be there and the touchdowns will go up, so the points might be there, which I think is what's going to elevate him above Hunter Henry. And the thing I like about Evan Engram is that he's actually finding targets down the field a little bit more than he did in his early years with Eli Manning. His ADOT was really low, and his yards. ADOT is just so if you guys don't know, it's the average depth of target, which means how far the ball is going down the field. His ADOT was rather low at around 4, just a touch over 4, but his yards after the catch was about at 8. And since Daniel Jones took over, his ADOT is closer to 8 yards past the line of scrimmage, and his yards after the catch have been about steady around like 5. So I think coupled with that, he'll probably, like I said, find the end zone a little bit more and be a little bit more productive as Daniel Jones gets more comfortable with the offense in year 3. And that I think will be enough to elevate him above Hunter Henry in this list right here.
Yeah, for sure, man. We're gonna look at the last tight end on our top 10 list, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the tight ends. But Mike Gesicki, the Miami tight end, one kind of de facto, had a pretty showing season. He had some nice catches here and there along the way. He finished with 159 fantasy points. He was targeted 85 times, caught 53 of them for 700 yards and 6 touchdowns. To round out the top 10, Jay, what are your thoughts on Mike Gesicki next season?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, he had 89 targets last season, 85 in 2019, 6 touchdowns last season, 5 in 2019. I think having Tua is a little bit of a downgrade for him as opposed to having the gunslinging Ryan Fitzpatrick. Tua does take care of the ball, but the thing that he struggles with is pushing the ball downfield. Now, hopefully getting Will Fuller and being able to line up Will Fuller and Devontae Parker on the outside would allow Mike Gesicki to work the middle of the field and open it up a little bit more. But again, I just think having Ryan Fitzpatrick as a fantasy player is better than having Tua Tagovailoa. Finished as tight end 12 in 2019, tight end 7 last year. You really saw him start to come alive just a little bit at the end. With Tua, when I kind of looked at the game log there, it seemed like they were in a couple of blowouts, which kind of led to it. He had 2 touchdown game. In the last 5, he had 25 catches for 289 and 4 touchdowns. So that was a good chunk of his work that he was able to do on the back end there, which is both encouraging. But then as you look a little deeper, you see that those games were, a little more explosive than Miami Dolphins games would normally like to be with Brian Flores as the coach. You can see why that was. So he's somebody that I'm not super bullish on. Again, I'd rather have Logan Thomas underneath him. Hayden Hurst is a guy that I'd be interested in drafting above him. But I do think, with Tua Tagovailoa, he has an opportunity to see some success, but I think it's mitigated by the fact that Tua is not the most explosive thrower of the football and doesn't make as many explosive plays as Ryan Fitzpatrick would, which is a little, weird to say, but coming from a first-round draft pick as high as Tua Tagovailoa was. But.
Yeah. Great take there, man. Okay, so let's do our favorite in the top 10. Why don't you start us off, Andrew? 30 seconds or less. Who you got here?
But other than Trav, I'll go ahead and say that my favorite guy is Darren Waller. I think he's just been very durable over the last 2 seasons and has shown steady progression as to what he can do and to what he can be in the Raiders offense. And I think he's going to continue, along with Josh Jacobs, to be a focal point for what's going to make the Raiders offense kind of go in 2021 and going forward. So I'll say Darren Waller out of this group.
What do you say, Jay?
Yeah, so I'm going to stay away from the top two guys just to, kind of change it up a little bit. I'll go Mark Andrews. Again, I really like Lamar Jackson. I think that Lamar Jackson is only going to get better as a passer the longer he's in the league. Love what they're doing with that Greg Roman offense. Obviously, he runs the ball really effectively. But as I kind of stated, how well Lamar Jackson plays is how well Mark Andrews is going to go. The touchdown percentage speaks for itself. He's going to consistently hold a high target percentage when Lamar Jackson throws the ball. He's going to hold a high target percentage when he's throwing touchdowns specifically. So I'm always going to be buying in on Mark Andrews. He's fourth on the list right now, which is already pretty high. But, you never know what happens. But we saw it last year with the running back position where injuries kind of mitigated and had a playing factor as to who finished in the top five. There were a lot of people that, pushed up into that top 5, top 10 category that we didn't expect. So I think that somebody like Mark Andrews, an injury here, an injury there, someone not being able to play up to their talent, all of a sudden Mark Andrews finishes a top 3 tight end. And I could see that happening pretty easily.
Right on. I'll just get mine quickly. I could see myself drafting Hockenson. And it's just because he was targeted like over 100 times last season, so I'll take like volume plays if I can't get Travis Kelce or George Kittle, obviously at a decent range of drafting. I'll go for like volume and I'll take Hockenson. I think he's a safe play if you're he has 100% of the target share in Detroit. So our favorite outside the top 10, and I'll just give mine real quick. It's the other guy that has a huge target share, and that's Logan Thomas out of Washington. We'll see how he deals with Fitzpatrick. I think he'll do well, and yeah, I just PPR. He played his first full season as a tight end, so I think he could be a PPR nightmare to face off against. So I'd rather have him on my team. Andrew, who's your favorite outside of the top 10?
So I'm going to go with a guy who used to be at the top of these lists, and I'm going to actually go with Rob Gronkowski for next season. Tom Brady, like you talked about in a previous show, is doing everything he can to get the band back together, and Gronkowski managed he played all 16 games, but really wasn't a big portion of what the offense was doing. He only managed 45 catches for 623 yards and 7 touchdowns. But with another offseason with Tom and coming off a Super Bowl win, I expect them to have him be more involved. I don't think Cameron Brate and O.J. Howard are necessarily better tight ends than him, even at this point in his career. So I expect I'll say Gronk here. Maybe has an outsider's chance of sneaking into the top 10.
Yeah, he definitely played us a little bit earlier in the season last year. He was like, I'm just here to block, and he kind of didn't really shine until like maybe I think 5 weeks into the season, and then he started really hitting his rhythm. Maybe that was conditioning, so we can possibly see a lot out of him. I like that pick a lot. What do you think, Jay? Who's your favorite outside the top 10?
So as you guys know, and as viewers have been noticing, I have a few flag plants that I had coming into the season that unfortunately are a little bit down on right now because the Chicago Bears decided to go freaking get Andy Dalton and ruin Cole Kmet. And then for my boy Donald Parham, the Chargers decided to go get Jared Cook, who's a very capable receiving tight end, just to get on my nerves and screw with my flag plants. So I'm going to go with a guy who, again, we're going to channel my boy Gru to the moon. Irv Smith Jr. Coming out of Minnesota with Kirk Cousins. So just a little background on Kirk Cousins. When he was in Washington from 2015 to 2017 in 2 tight end sets, he threw the ball 256 times, 177 completions for 2,621 yards and a 10.24 yards per attempt. Both of those were first in the league throughout those 2 years. Minnesota obviously noticed this when they signed him. This last year, Minnesota ran all but 12 of their 1,023 plays with at least one tight end on the field. And on 445 of those snaps, which is 43%, they had 2 tight ends on the field. Kirk Cousins was pretty good last season when he was targeting anybody, but he was really darn good when he was targeting Irv Smith, even on those limited targets that he was able to see. He had a 134.4 passer rating when targeting Irv Smith. To be perfect, you need a 153.3, so that's pretty gosh darn good. He scored 5 touchdowns, and Irv Smith averaged 12.2 yards per catch every time he was able to catch the ball last season. So not having Kyle Rudolph, how much tight end sets that they like to run over there in Minnesota. Obviously, Mike Zimmer is a guy who loves to run the football as well. So Irv Smith's going to be out there. He's an explosive playmaker. And then, when you're already having to worry about Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen and Dalvin Cook, Irv Smith's the guy that I can really see popping next year. So I really am bullish on Irv Smith and his fantasy potential going into next year.
Awesome. I like both of your picks a lot. I like mine too. So I think we have a lot of fantastic upside outside of the top 10 for next season. And so I think if you miss out on the top 3, I think you should just invest later in the draft and play out in those high upside picks. There's only so many tight ends that one person can roster, and I think you'll have an opportunity to get one at a good price later in the draft, or get a good price for one like Jay has mentioned with Parham and Cole Kmet for your DFS lineups. Okay, so we're gonna play a small, quick little game called Who Am I? I'm gonna give these two a chance to buzz in by saying their name and who they think I am talking about. Hopefully they didn't cheat and look at my notes. Okay, this is tight end special, so obviously it's a tight end. Okay, I am 6'6", 29 years old. I went to Virginia Tech. I am coming off my best statistical season. 3 different quarterbacks threw me a touchdown last year. 5 of my 6 scores were in the second quarter, and all of my scores were 15-yard catches or less. I have a new QB in town. In this QB's career, he has thrown 222 touchdowns, 40 of those touchdowns to tight ends. I wear number 82. I play for a football team.
Oh, Johnny, I already know. I'm sorry. It's LT3. My bad. Logan Thomas.
Oh, dude. Yeah. Was he done with the question?
Oh, I didn't know.
Hey.
I was just going to pop in. Whenever I know it, pop in, right?
Oh, that's
Exactly.
the thing?
Oh, okay. That's why I put my
go
finger
ahead.
up. I was like, oh,
All
I
right.
know that. Okay,
Never
cool. Oh, I got this.
So over Ryan Fitzpatrick's career, he's thrown 18% of his touchdowns to tight ends.
Yeah.
I think as I had mentioned about Logan Thomas, I'm excited for him. And 152 of Fitzpatrick's 222 touchdowns have been under 20 yards. So I also like that too for those short or touchdown plays. Logan Thomas has the potential here to maybe have a flashy, fantastic season. And I chose Logan Thomas because I like Logan Thomas. That was probably too easy. So let's get a little more difficult.
Okay, here we go.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we have 3 players. We have 3 players here. Okay, try to guess who these are. Okay. Player A, he played 7 games, 63 targets, 43 catches, 515 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Okay, so about half a season, 40 plus catches, 515 yards. We're already looking at better stats than some of these guys, some of the tight ends in the top 10 last year.
Yeah.
This person played 8 games, 63 targets, 48 catches, 634 yards, and 2 touchdowns.
Okay, I know that one.
Player C, 16 games, 136 targets, 88 catches, 1,377 yards, and 5 touchdowns. It is kind of a trick question, but who is this person?
Oh, so they're all one person.
Oh, you might have just nailed me there. Yeah, it's
no way.
I can't lie. It's one person. Who's that person? So this is over
George
3
Kittle.
seasons.
George Kittle.
Yeah, George Kittle. Yeah.
All right, Andrew gets it.
Yes.
Yeah, George Kittle. So to put this into perspective, with even when he's injured, this guy's still a reliable source to have on your roster.
Absolutely.
Last year, so player B was Kittle. 63 targets, 48 catches, 634 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So even just having him for half the season was serviceable, which is kind of like half of his production is literally half of his 2018 breakout season. So again, even if Kittle is your plan B on the bench, I think he's a great person to invest into, which is why sometimes I will vulture an IR spot for Kittle, which is what I did last season in my fantasy team, and then I got him back for a couple of games, and so he did pretty well for me. But thank you guys for both playing. I'm glad you both won one round. I don't have a tiebreaker option, but that's okay.
Okay, he doesn't have to win them all. That's okay.
Thank you guys for tuning in to episode 2. This has been the tight end breakdown for the fantasy football 2021 season. As always, we are AJA Sports. We're glad you guys were able to join us. Until next time. Bye.